So tonight I thought we could talk about the cult of materialism. Generally, when we use the word cult, it's a bit derogatory, right? It, but it's usually assigned to other spiritual or quasi-spiritual groups. And the basic characteristic is that um, there's a set of beliefs that are fervently held, never questioned by those within the group. Right? It doesn't have to be a spiritual. Sometimes the word cult is used for sometimes political figures if the following seems um, to be fervent believers, not willing to question much of anything. Could be applied to, even very devoted followers of musicians. So it can be used more generally. So tonight I thought we could sort of apply that term to materialism. So by materialism, I don't just mean liking to buy things. I mean it in a much more general sense. I mean the belief in the reality of everything that we can experience through our senses. In other words, the world. What we commonly take the world to be is a ongoing, objective reality that exists whether we're here or not. It existed before we arrived. It'll continue to exist after we pass on. It has its own life. It goes on, independent of whatever it is that we are essentially. Right? That's the belief, and I call it a belief because no one has actually ever directly experienced the world. What we experience is our perceptions of the world, and those perceptions are all generated within this body mind. In other words, when we hear something, we intuit that it's happening in the other room, but where we actually hear it is inside our own head. It's transmitted, as vibrations through our eardrum, enters our brain. Brain does its thing. And then there's something that notices that. Same with our other senses. Sense of sight. We firmly believe that we see an object in the distance, a tree across the meadow, but the actual image is generated inside our own head. In other words, our entire life is spent wholly within this body mind. I mean, we can function as if all of that exists. We can drive a car and we don't hit other things. This is good. But it's when we're looking for what is fundamentally true, the belief that that exterior world exists in an objective way is open to question. But not many people are willing to do that. It is so, the cult of this materialism is so convincing. The world is convincing. I mean, it's magnificent, an absolutely amazing creation. And so it's very convincing that it exists. as a big, extraordinary exterior space, and me as a vulnerable little person here temporarily can feel like my job is just to get by as best I can. Maybe derive a few pleasures along the way, hopefully avoid most pitfalls, and enjoy life while it lasts. But the belief is that what's real, what's solid, what's foundational, what's irreducibly real is the outside world. So that's the belief that I want to examine tonight, because that's the belief that's the foundation of the cult of materialism. Everybody believes it. Nobody questions it. It's almost seems a bit odd, almost suspicious to even question the validity of that statement, that the world is fundamental, right? So scientists, sort of the high priests of this cult, go on trying to find the building blocks of this material world, which keep, sort of receding into the horizon. As the closer they look, the smaller they get. And there is this odd discovery in the last 100 years. The discovery is 100 years old now, but we haven't, as a society, haven't quite come to grips with it. And the point that was discovered and accepted by physicists is that objects, particles, appear as particles when they're observed. Otherwise, they're probabilities, not really hard and fast objects like we imagine a table to be. So this is really curious. I mean, it doesn't make sense. We don't see that at the scale that we're living at. But the fundamental nature of this reality is that it's not fixed. It really comes in and out of existence based on what is conscious of that material. Okay, so this is the core belief, and the core belief of this cult is that the consciousness, awareness of that we all experience is generated by the brain. The brain is foundational part of this body, necessary for consciousness. But that is a belief. It's not, it's an assumption. Thoughts are viewed in the brain. Exterior stimulation is transported to the brain, and we have the capacity to notice what that recreated image looks like. But the presumption that awareness is a function of those neurons in our head is a belief. That's the core belief. That consciousness is dependent on our brain. The other possibility that's not considered very often, it's sort of contrary to this fundamental belief of this cult, is that consciousness is primary and everything else appears within it. So we're not saying that the body doesn't exist. There's something happening here, but it doesn't exist in the way we have been taught that it does. It doesn't exist as a finite, separate, temporary object. It exists as an appearance within awareness. The only way we know that we even have a body is because we can look at it, we can touch it, we can sense it internally. But all of those, all of these body ways to perceive all only register within the awareness that we are. So we're not saying that this belief in our body-mind structure is to be neglected. Obviously not. I mean, there's a lot to be learned there. I mean, we can, through being in these forms and interacting with other people, we can learn to play nice, for example, hopefully. We can learn to take care of these forms. Beautiful. We can learn what that sense of caring, loving to other people, other creatures, the natural world can feel like. Beautiful, right? So there's a lot to be learned through this form, but the question remains, is this form fundamentally what I am? So even to question that sort of is sort of the uncomfortable hint. Same with cult members. Sometimes the first hint to question their being in as a member of a particular cult, sometimes the first hint is like, wait a minute, I'm not sure this is entirely true. I think I'm going to look for myself rather than depend on what everybody else is telling me is true. That's sort of the first required step. And same is true in sort of going along with how the world appears to be, where it feels like if we take ourselves to be this separate, independent form, me, then, and the world is all out there, it's almost like the world is almost presenting itself to be mind for pleasure, mind to gain what I believe will make me happy, and that's how most people approach the world. That out in the world, there's something to fill my desires, maybe relationships, maybe adventures, maybe success, fame, wealth, whatever your thing is. And so we pursue these out into the world, hoping that the world will repay us for our efforts. Right? And so we can spend a great deal of life energy sort of seeking out in the world to fulfill what we hope will make us happy, right? Give us a sense of contentment. And we can spend our entire life doing that, seeking outward. And if we're lucky, we've become frustrated. Our hope of ever finding fulfillment in the outside world is dashed, hopefully, right? That's usually what's required before we're willing to come back home, in a sense, and look to see what it is that's actually living this life, right? Prior to that, it's like, how can life fulfill this, whatever this is? I'm not sure what this is, but hopefully, if I'm fulfilled by the next circumstance, achievement that I find outside, then that will prove sufficient, fulfilling. So that's how we may spend our life, seeking that. But when we finally are willing to come back home and see what's actually living this life, because if we don't know what's living this life, why are we doing whatever it is that we're doing? It raises the question. When we come back to this sense of awareness and come back to it often and really see that everything that we've ever experienced or thought or felt has only been experienced with an awareness, only an appearance, an impermanent, always moving appearance within. I don't know if you can still hear me or not. Did anybody nod their head that they can hear me? Yes? Okay. Somehow, for some reason, we lost